As someone that works for both of the big outlets, Fightful and Bodyslam, what are some differences that you notice?
Hey guys, this is Tempest from Wrestle Talk, and I'm reminding you to support Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Rubbish, and stand back for another interview. Completing the Rhapsody lineup. Last, but certainly not least, I'm joined by Righteous Reg. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tom. I really appreciate it. The Rhapsody boys appreciate you wanting to have all three of us on. So it's great to complete the trifecta of Rhapsody guys.
It really is. I'll say this publicly now. I can't thank you all enough for giving up your hard-earned time to come and do this for me.
Yeah, no problem, man. We're having a good time talking pro wrestling, talking things.
So speaking of pro wrestling, if we take this back, how does your fandom first begin?
It's been a long time, honestly, Tom. I remember watching as I probably was like 4 years old and just being mesmerized by everything surrounding pro wrestling. I think that I've been a Bret Hart fan for a really long time. Like Bret the Hitman Hart's probably my favorite wrestler of all time. And I remember the first videotape I had was SummerSlam 91, and he wrestled Mr. Perfect, one of his best matches ever. And like ever since then, it's just been like pro wrestling is everything. Every Monday night, every time that it's on. I was a pro wrestling kid in school. It was like that intense about it.
Well, I should have asked you this in the beginning, but what came first? Was it your love of music or your love of wrestling?
Probably music, because music was played in the house, like, from birth. I've been hearing music being played, and I've always been in love with music. So, but they pretty hand in hand, because pretty soon after that is when my love for pro wrestling came.
Okay, so the Bret Hart Mr. Perfect match you discovered, I think, if I'm correct, is it the SummerSlam one or the King of the Ring one?
The SummerSlam 91.
Okay. So what hooked you in about that at that time?
I don't know. I think pretty early I was never really mesmerized by the big giant wrestlers that WWF was trying to push onto us. Something about Bret Hart just immediately clicked. I just was immediately into his character, into his moves, the sharpshooter, the story that was told. His mom and dad were there in the building and they were telling the story for a while. He was making his singles breakout that year and trying to get away from the Hart Foundation. Something was just right about him, and I just never stopped because he's, the personified professional wrestler is Bret the Hitman Hart. So,
So if we continue into your fandom, when did you start watching like live wrestling? Was it pretty soon after, or were you a tape trader for a few years?
Yeah, no, that's funny. I was just actually looking up the first ever live show that I went to. And the first ever live show that I went to was in 1994. I'm from a place here in California called Bakersfield. They had a show at the one of the community colleges, and the main event was Razor Ramon versus Diesel. It was I remember this place, the main event, vividly because those were two of the hottest guys in the company at the point. Former world champion and Diesel, and like it was just like a perfect moment to see two, because Bakersfield wasn't a hot town, so we got like the B show, so we didn't get like Macho Man and people that you would think you would want to get, but when you get a main event like Diesel and Razor Ramon, I was forever hooked on live wrestling. And at this point in my life, I've been to more live wrestling shows. Like I couldn't count at this point how many live wrestling shows. I love live pro wrestling more than anything in the world. Standing in the back of a independent wrestling show, just taking in the fans, taking in the moves, taking in everything going on with the show is just like, I love it. It's my favorite place.
If someone said to you, look, you can have live wrestling, but you can't watch the product on TV. But you have to attend every show and you have to fund your own travel, etc., etc. Would you do it?
Funding my own show, no. Money is crazy, impossible. But if I had the funds to do it 100%, I think I would.
What I mean
choose
by funding your own show, I don't think I worded that correctly, but like,
Yeah.
you have to be able to get to every show that's on to be able to see it. You can't watch it live.
Right.
You can't watch it on the TV anymore.
Gotcha. You
Would
can
you do
only
it?
watch it live. And then if the opposite, you couldn't watch it live if you only watched it on TV. I probably would stick to the live wrestling, honestly. It's just something about being in there with the fans, being a part of the show, seeing it at a organic level. Cause I like little independent shows. So seeing wrestlers, like some of them are in their first matches, some of them are just like beginning their careers, to see their transition, see the successes of everybody. Just like, you can't really replicate that or watching it on TV.
Fair enough. What has been your favorite live moment?
I have a couple, but I think as a long time, as a black man in the wrestling space, the most important moment that we've had recently was Kofi Kingston WrestleMania 35. I was there when he won the world championship from Daniel Bryan. It was like, I've never experienced a moment like that live, just like the culmination of Kofi not thinking that he could win. It's Bryan Danielson, my favorite, the greatest wrestler of our generation, like the best guy, and he put him over and everything, like all the moments, and for that to get to that moment and for him to actually win, you can't beat that. Happy birthday, Kofi Kingston, too. It's his birthday, but yeah, that was that moment is forever in time. WrestleMania 35, seeing Kofi, seeing the New Day, Woods and Big E carrying him while he has a championship.
Woods has got tears in his eyes. Like,
yeah.
Even as a whiter than marshmallow person, I can understand the gravity of that situation. Do you know what I mean? And almost like, yeah, he deserved it.
It's amazing.
The thing that I love about that story, and we will go back to your story in a minute. Like, I love the fact that although it didn't go to Booker T territory.
Right.
I'll put it that way.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, if
that's the best thing. Like they didn't play like the race card or try to do anything crazy throughout Kofi. It was just like, no, this is a guy that deserves it. That great moment that they had when the Woods and Big E were doing the gauntlet match, and then the Usos were like, you guys got it. We want Kofi to have this. Like everything connected to that was just so perfectly written. And they didn't, WWE at the time wasn't writing things. They kind of stumbled upon it. It wasn't supposed to be how it is. So it all worked out how it was supposed to work out.
Definitely. But if we move on in your fandom / career, have you had like a gap period that you've stopped watching wrestling and been like, okay, I'm going to give this a break for a little while?
No, never. That's the one thing that has never in my life happened. All my friends fell I love, my family. When I was younger, like everybody that I knew besides my mom, like liked wrestling. Like everybody was like into it. All the dudes that I knew, we all watched it together. Then eventually you start to grow up, start to get into other interests. But like, no, professional wrestling never stopped being something that I love. We could get into a little bit of it. I did some backyard wrestling. I did a little bit of pro wrestling myself. I've been inside of a ring. Like, it's just something that I've always loved since it feels like birth, but for a really long time. There's never been a moment where I'm like, oh, this sucks. Like, it's just like, there's always, especially at a time like now, there's always something to watch. Like, even when I kind of fell out of love with WWE for a while, there was all these other things. There was PWG, there was Ring of Honor, there was Impact, there was all these other places that were doing something that I would like. So there wasn't a time for me where I didn't love it, because I love so much about it that if one aspect wasn't working out, I just go find another one.
Fair enough. So with your love of wrestling, shall we say, like, has there been an era but it sounds like you would give up promotions rather than wrestling itself. Has there been an era of a specific promotion that you've been like, okay, I'm going to put you down for a little while?
WWE before 2 weeks ago, pretty much from the moment that Brock Lesnar beat Kofi Kingston in 9 seconds or whatever, like something inside me just was gone about WWE. I was like, oh, that's awful. And they never recovered. And so like, I consider, like, the entire time we're talking about my fandom, WWE was number one when the Attitude Era was going on, and WCW was happening. I was team WWF. I've been team WWF. I fight for the death for them. But then when that happened, and then just like the correlations of everything not really being that great, I was done. I was like, you know what? The only reason I continued to watch it was because Rhapsody, and it was like we were talking about it, so I might as well check it out. But then every time I would check it out, it'd be so awful. So yeah, I was totally like, I'm good here. I don't need to see WWF anymore. I've loved it for 30 years, but I'm done. So I'm really excited that, the last 2 weeks has been, a little bit of improvement.
So am I. But moving on to Grapsody, because you brought up Grapsody with your great co-hosts, Will Washington and Phil Lindsay. So I've heard their stories of how Grapsody came about. So how did it come about for you?
Yeah, pretty much it was like I had developed a relationship with Phil over the years just because I was really a big fan of his writing and Black wrestling fans in the space. If you find someone kind of connect with and have the same kind of mind state into professional wrestling, you just get with them. So it was Phil Lindsay and shout out to my homie Andrew Thompson, who like I just like really admired these two wrestling media dudes. They were doing interviews and doing their own things in different spaces. So I had always been told Phil for probably 2 years, like, we need to do something together. We need to do a project together. We need to get this. We have to do something to show that we're homies. We're out here. We're good people in this space. And so Will Washington, of course, you probably heard his story when he was on this podcast, been doing podcasting for 17 years, a veteran, one of the original wrestling podcasters. So he had grown to kind of something with his other podcast, so he wanted to move on.
If you haven't checked out why, he tells the full story in that interview. So please check out the interview.
Exactly.
Sorry, so he cheap plug, I do apologize.
No, of course, this is your podcast. You should plug your podcast. So yeah, he switches over. He wants to start doing his own podcast Saturday mornings, funny enough. So one Saturday, he's like, hey, you want to come on, do the show? Yeah, come on, do the show. It's Saturday. We just go for like 2 hours, just having a great time, whatever. I'm like, oh, this is really fun. I like Will. He's a great, I followed him on Twitter for a couple of years, and I knew we had the same mindset also. So it felt right. And so after the podcast was over, this is probably the most famous part of the story, is like, I was like, hey, Will, you, Phil and I should do something together. And funny enough, Will and Phil had just did a podcast, that same podcast, like 2 weeks before that. And Will was like a light bulb went off in his head immediately. And legit, like the next day, he was like, hey, you want to get on a group call? And we got on a group call, and he was like, hey, you guys want to do Rhapsody? Blah, blah, blah. He like had already talked to Fightful and was doing everything. Like he put everything together. And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And Phil was all the way in. We were all in immediately. There was no reservations. And so we hit the ground running and have been having an amazing time.
I've heard from your Rhapsody brethren about how Fightful was the perfect place because of the community they've built. But why do you feel like Fightful was the perfect place, considering the other outlets that you do work for at times?
Well, I think at this point, as far as wrestling journalism, wrestling news goes, Fightful's number one. Like, it's hard to when stories break. Every time I read a story on another site, I'm like, oh, this is a cool story, and it's all brought to you by Fightful Select or something. Like, Fightful is the number one wrestling outlet. So I felt like, of course, this is an easy transition, and it immediate. I mean, I didn't really know exactly what it would be like, but as soon as we started doing the podcast and all the people that came along, all the supporters that came along, just because they get down with everything from Fightful, I was like, oh, this is the right move. They have a great community. Everybody that supports us, like, really supports us. And the people that support Rhapsody, they support everything Fightful. So it felt right just because everybody was like, the community felt really good to us. So it felt like the perfect place. And from the, since it's been October, we figured out that it is the exact place we should have started.
Fair enough. So then moving on to some of your other work, how do you come to work on Indeed with Mike on Bodyslam?
Yeah, pretty much. Bodyslam's also a great outlet for professional wrestling news, professional wrestling, everything. So that's another outlet that I've always just kind of admired. Cassidy, I've talked to him a few times. We've had a few conversations. I just wanted to do another podcast with Rhapsody. It's mostly about AEW and WWE. That's just like how it is. Like they dominate most of our talking time. Most of our points are like about things surrounding those two companies. And so I love independent pro wrestling. Like that's been my love since pretty much since like 2002. Since 2002, it's been like independent wrestling like has pretty much been above the mainstream ones until AEW came along and started giving me independent wrestling. So yeah, it was just like I loved independent wrestling. I always want to talk about independent wrestling. I go to more independent wrestling shows than I go to any other shows. So it felt like I needed an outlet to show that. So I wanted to talk about independent wrestling on a podcast. And so Mike, I started working with some things and on Bodyslam, and Mike was producing everything. We ended up doing a podcast, his podcast, Indeed. He started Indeed, just him. And so we did a podcast together with Baron Black from AEW. Shout out to Baron Black. Battle Slam got his first victory very recently, but we did a podcast together. Then we did another podcast, and it just like we were just clicking, and we just had a great time. So we decided that let's just make it full time. Let's just do Indeed together. We both love independent wrestling more than anyone should, so we're here.
As someone that works for both of the big outlets, Fightful and Bodyslam, what are some differences that you notice when you're working for both outlets?
Nothing really big. Like it's pretty cut and dry. Like both companies are very accepting to ideas or anything that you want to be pitched. Cassidy's super, like I could text Cassidy right now and be like, hey, let's do this. And he's totally in. He's super, super cool and super dope. Sean Ross Sapp, is so easy to get to. Anytime we need anything, we could legit just like hit him in the DM and be like, hey, we need this or whatever. It's just both places are great. There's not really any big differences where I'm like, oh, this one's doing this or this is doing this. They're both like really fun to work for.
Fair enough. What about your chemistry with Mike? How it sounds like it was very apparent from day dot. Like you had some chemistry, but like, how was it apparent from day one that you had chemistry as co-hosts?
Yeah, I think we were just like, we had a couple of DMs and pretty much we just like really like the same wrestling, the same independent stars, the same things. And so when we got on to actually having a conversation, we actually had like a 2-hour conversation one time, me, Cassidy, and Mike, and we're just bullshitting and whatever. And it was really cool. So what happened was, yeah, when we got to doing the podcast, the conversation with Mike and I was just really easy. It was just flowing. It didn't seem like work, and we both were going to do a podcast separately, but and just kind of rely on guests. But then we're just like, we don't want to ever have to do this podcast alone. We should always be like a co-host together thing. So the chemistry was pretty immediate. So the idea to do Indeed together came together pretty quickly.
Shout out to Mike, by the way. He is just a dope guy. Like
super dope, hard working, always going at it.
I do a small show for Bodyslam, and he's always there. Like, if you need anything, like, just let me know. And I'm like, you don't have to do that, but I really appreciate that. And
yeah, no, he does not have to do that, and he's like that to everyone that he meets too. A super dope dude. Appreciate Mike a lot.
Definitely. So, as we look at wrapping this up, Reg, we're going to go into a segment now that I call generic questions. So those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite tag team, favorite theme song, and favorite wrestler of all time. Basically questions that I'm sure Reg gets asked on social media quite regularly, but now he'll have a place to be like, look, guys, I've answered this. Please go watch this. So what's your favorite match of all time?
Oh, see, that's there's so many. I think just because I watched it so many times as a kid, I like to connect. It's just like kind of connected to the style of professional wrestling that I like. Probably TLC 1 from SummerSlam 2000, Dudley Boys, Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian. I love spots. I love balls to the wall wrestling. I love tables. I love all that, everything that went into that match and kind of what that led to. And what all the tag teams that came from being inspired by that. So TLC 1, maybe I even say TLC 2 because just there was so much carnage and it's attached to WrestleMania 17. TLC is what I would watch as just so many times and as an adult. So I will say that.
You strike me as someone that may have worn a videotape out that has those TLC one or two or 4 or 500. Yes, definitely. Just every day, constant back to back
watch it, go to school, come home from school, watch it again like it's new. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, fair enough. What about your favorite pay-per-view of all time?
Ooh, that's a good question too. There's a bunch of them that I like, but I'm gonna
For
stick with
you,
one.
for
Yeah, for
you,
me,
I will say favorite pay-per-view you watched on your couch and favorite pay-per-view you watched live.
yes, perfect. That's great. I'm gonna for the favorite pay per view that I've watched live. Definitely gonna say WrestleMania 30, just because, like I said, Bryan Danielson is the greatest wrestler of our generation, and to see that it was in New Orleans, it was Bryan Danielson's just swan song, pretty much. Like nobody ever thought he would make it in the WWE. Like they told him for years and years that he wasn't gonna be the guy. He became the guy, won the world championship, held it high, beat Triple H, Randy Orton, Batista. He was in the newspaper. Also, the craziest moment in wrestling history I've ever had live. Brock Lesnar
Oh,
beating
of
The Undertaker. The
course.
streak. I've been to, remember I told you I've been to a really lot of wrestling shows. Never in my life have I ever felt a moment like 1, 2, 3, Undertaker lost, and the whole crowd, we're all just like looking at each other like, what? Like, no one expected it. I didn't expect it. I was like, this is going to be an easy win for Undertaker. So he wins. You can legit, I know this is a cliche saying, but you could hear a pin drop in the building. Everyone
And
is
all
just
I
like,
can see is that
what?
guy, you know, the one that they always screenshot
Yes,
when they talk about that
exactly.
moment. Yeah.
That was the entire, we were all like unbelievable. We just could not believe it. And so, yeah, that was an amazing moment. As far as my favorite pay-per-view of all time, probably in the same vein of me wearing out a tape, ECW Barely Legal, just
Ooh.
because everything that's connected. ECW might be my favorite promotion of all time. Been saying recently that it is because I've been watching a lot of ECW. At the time, WWF wasn't super doing it for me, and to discover this brand that was doing some crazy shit, pretty much what I like as professional wrestling now, they were doing. And so I watched that. I borrowed that tape from my classmate, and I would just watch the crap out of that 1997 ECW Barely Legal, Taz and Sabu, one of my favorite matches of all time. Terry Funk wins in the main event. Great show, great time. That's the one.
Fair enough. What about your favorite tag team of all time?
Easy, easy. Don't have to think about it. The reason that Wednesday Night Wrestling exists right now, the greatest tag team of all time, Nick, Matt, Jackson, the Young Bucks. No question about it. No
Not what I
one's
thought
even
you were gonna
close.
say. I'm not
No
gonna
one,
lie.
there would not be a wrestling company that the entire world talks about if it wasn't for what these guys did. I watched a lot of PWG live, like I was going like all the time being in California. You grow a connection with the tag team like the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks are PWG. I call myself PWG Young Boy. So I've been connected to these guys. I've seen them with my own two eyes do amazing, crazy things, get crowds to, when they come out, hate them so much, but at the end of the match, we're all practically crying from excitement. The Young Bucks, no question about it. All the greatest tag team, all the greatest tag matches of the last 15 years, they're done. If your favorite tag team is your favorite tag team, they're probably stealing from the Young Bucks. It's the Young Bucks, no question about it.
Fair enough. And I love the passion, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Yes, I have to. It's always.
what about, and then to wrap this up. Oh wait, favorite theme song of all time.
Oh, that is damn, that's a tough, tough
Once
question.
again, I will split this into two categories. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't pick one of your own and say favorite theme song you've been on, and then favorite theme song of all time.
Yeah, well, easily I did the theme song of the he had it as a theme for a little bit. Powerhouse Hobbs, my favorite wrestler, one of my great friends. He's AEW wrestler. Anything to just to be able to be connected to him in any way was an amazing experience. So shout out to Powerhouse Hobbs. And I think I don't there's so many theme songs, but I just think being a part of Shinsuke Nakamura when his theme was at its height in WWE, and just everyone was involved. They didn't screw anything up. They just had it. It was just perfect. He was coming out. Great. Phenomenal. I love
Fair
it.
enough. And as we wrap this up, favorite wrestler of all time.
I think I said it a little bit before. Bret the Hitman Hart, I think, has always been, probably since 1993, the guy. There was a little bit of time where Shawn Michaels was the guy. It's pretty much my entire life been a fight between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Funny enough, of course it has, between being my favorite wrestler. Like, it depends on how recently I watched a show. Like WrestleMania, if I've just watched WrestleMania 25, The Undertaker, which I think is the greatest WWE match of all time. If I've seen that match, I'm like Shawn Michaels either.
Did I ask you your favorite match? I've gone completely
You did.
blank.
Yeah, no, you did. I said TLC, but
I don't know.
I might like that Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. So much stories attached to that. But then if I just watch WrestleMania 13, Stone Cold and Bret Hart, I'm like, yo, Bret Hart, that's a masterpiece. Like, how do you put this together? You're an artist. This is crazy. So, but yeah, I'm gonna say Bret the Hitman Hart just because I've been connected to him as a fan legit for 30 years at this point.
Fair enough. As we wrap this up, then, Reg, the question I end all my interviews on is, with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of way. So what is one piece of content from you want the good people to check out? And then what is one that you're like, if you could avoid that, I would appreciate
it? Definitely check out my music. I'm a musician. If you've heard Rhapsody and you've watched the show, the beginning theme song, I wrote that. I produced the beat. Like, that's me. So check out righteousreg.bandcamp.com. We talked about Rhapsody. Please check out Rhapsody. Indeed, those are my things. And there's really nothing like everything I'm attached to. Like, check it out. PWI, the new PWI 500 is coming out very soon. Definitely check out that magazine. I write a column, the Righteous Wrap Up, and every issue. That's a great magazine. Really nothing, man. I love it. Everything's great.
it. Fair enough. Okay, so as we wrap this up, where can the good people find you and your content?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Righteous Reg. Same thing on Instagram. I put a lot of content on Twitter just because I have a nice following. Everybody's really cool there. You can see my music videos. You can see the Black Wrestling's 500, which is coming out very soon. You can see everything that I have going on YouTube, Righteous Reg, Rhapsody every Saturday morning. Indeed, weekly on Bodyslam. righteousreg.bandcamp.com. Those are the places you can find me. If you need to find me on the internet, that is where I am.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow bodyslam.net for my show with Cassidy Haynes, the Wrestle Watch podcast. Follow bodyslam.net on Twitter and follow the Wrestle Watch podcast on Twitter to help the Wrestle Watch pod on Twitter to help us pick our match every week. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.